So, you're thinking of flying with Ryanair. It's Europe's most popular airline, and on paper, it could be a great choice for your wallet. But as we discovered, there are traps and pitfalls for the unwary, which could quickly wipe out any of those potential savings. In this video, we're going to show you how to get the very best from your Ryanair experience.
Okay, we've just flown from Stansted to Podgorica and we have just learned a ton about flying with Ryanair. We've documented everything from first loading the Ryanair website and finally booked the ticket to the moment that we landed to create this ultimate Ryanair guide.
Ryanair is able to offer low fares because it is no frills, has direct routes, often uses secondary airports and maximises aircraft utilisation with short turnarounds. But this also means that it can appear to be giving a hard sell to high profit extras.
We've got some great tips and ideas for you, and towards the end of the video we'll go through an example of how much you can save by applying some of the following tips in practice.
The Ryanair website is designed to make you spend money on add-ons to this basic price which appears after you hit the search button. It can feel like a minefield of pop-ups and confusing options, and we'll show you exactly how to navigate it without paying for extras you don't need.
Our first key tip is that, unlike with many airlines, this basic fare here doesn't necessarily go up as you get closer to the travel date. We bought our flights nearly 5 weeks in advance and paid £42 for the basic fare. This was purchased on a Tuesday. The previous Friday and Saturday it had been as high as £62 for the basic fare. We tracked the basic fare almost daily. While no clear pattern emerged, we generally saw higher prices towards the end of the week and weekends for the exact same flight.
Our next tip is that we typically don't recommend booking your flights as a return for 3 reasons. Firstly, if you book as a return, then the return leg will be priced in the same currency as the outbound. If you book them separately, then the return will be priced in local currency, and in our research that always meant it was cheaper, sometimes by £1 or 2, but sometimes by even more. Secondly, by booking separately, we found that add-ons, which we cover next, whether upgrades to things like the regular fare or baggage charges, were often cheaper on the return leg when paid in the local currency. Finally, if you miss the outbound flight, then your return flight will be automatically cancelled and you'll lose the entire booking.
Back to this basic price now, which appears when you do the search. What does it actually get you? Well, it gets you from A to B, but that's pretty much it. Gone are the days of Ryanair allowing you to take a wheelie bag on for free, which is why the next step in the booking process involves a hard sell on baggage options. The basic fare baggage allowance is small. You can take on board a bag whose dimensions must not exceed 40 by 25 by 20 centimetres and must fit under the seat in front of you. We'll show you what we managed to pack into our basic bag in a moment.
If you want to take an additional bag larger than these dimensions on board, then you have to pay extra. Okay, so it's early July 2025 and been announced in the media that Ryanair is increasing the size of the small bag that is included in all fares. That's the one that's designed to go under the seat. Now the current sizing maximum is 40 by 20 by 25 centimetres, and what Ryanair is announcing, according to the media, is that that will increase to 40 by 20 by 30 centimetres. So this is generally good news. However, as is often the case with Ryanair, we think there is also an element of marketing hype, and here's why. Well, the reason is because as far as we are aware, these sizes here, which you will find at airports, at the check-in areas and at the gate, are already set to 40 by 20 by 30 centimetres. Now, if you have a bag that already only just fits into those sizes, then just a word of warning, do not go and buy a bigger bag, because you may find that the sizes do not change with this new regulation which Ryanair, we understand, is producing.
This change by Ryanair, we believe, is its response to an EU standard on baggage size and actually gives Ryanair passengers a slightly larger small bag allowance than the EU minimum. Do not, however, become confused with other news covered in the media recently related to carry-on baggage charges. In late June 2025, the EU Parliament Transport Committee voted in favour of a proposal to ban airlines from charging for carry-on baggage. To be clear, this is absolutely not law yet and is unlikely to be so for a while, as the proposal has to make its way through the complex EU lawmaking process. For the time being, if you want to take a bag on board with you on a Ryanair flight larger than 40 by 20 by 30 centimetres, then you will have to pay. So keep watching this video to find out how to limit the cost to you and leave more money in your wallet.
If you stick with just the basic fare, then Ryanair will select your seat for you during the check-in, and it is highly likely to split up adults aged 12 or over and not seat them together. If you're travelling with children aged under 12, then we've covered you specifically a bit later on, because there are some critical rules about seating which you need to know.
The Ryanair website will try to push you to buy one of these 3 packages, which it calls fares. There are 5 key points which we think you'll find it useful to know about these fares. You can buy the benefits such as bigger additional bags and seat selection independently later in the booking process. During our research, we found that it was nearly always cheaper to do this rather than buy them as a package.
If booking for more than one person, then everyone on your booking must buy the same package. Whilst this might suit you, it may also prove to be expensive overkill. In our experience, for example, for shorter trips, we'll often share a wheelie. When flying with Ryanair, this could save a couple in the region of £45 or €55 on a return trip.
The fare bundles are not a straight build on each other. The most popular, the regular fare, includes a 10 kilo larger carry-on of maximum dimensions 55 by 40 by 20 centimetres, in addition to the small under-seat bag, as well as priority boarding and limited seat choice at the time of booking. Whilst the Plus fare includes a 20 kilo checked bag and limited seat selection, but crucially does not include a larger carry-on or priority boarding.
The Flexi Plus fare introduces ticket flexibility, greater choice of seats, and a larger carry-on, but does not include a checked bag. Priority boarding, we think, is a bit of a marketing trick and a throwback to the days where seats were not allocated at check-in and involved passengers choosing their own seats when they boarded the aircraft. At that time, priority boarding was a way of paying to be one of the first on board and thus select a nicer seat. Nowadays, every passenger gets an allocated seat, whether one they have paid to select or that is system allocated at check-in.
Priority boarding applies to passengers who have paid to bring on board a second, larger carry-on, which needs to go in the overhead lockers. It actually suits Ryanair because it speeds up the overall boarding process and makes turnarounds quicker and more efficient. Our advice is not to stress too much over the concept. If you only buy the basic fare, then you still get allocated a seat, and all you will have with you is a small bag which will fit under the seat in front.
Talking of seat selection, this is the next hard sell in the booking process. Ryanair plays a game here by trying to make you believe that being allocated the middle seat is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. Our advice is don't let them dictate what you do and don't like. Before the days of online check-in, you got little or no choice of where you sat with any airline, so only pay to select your seat if it really does matter to you.
This might include sitting with other members of your party, and there is plenty of evidence that Ryanair, amongst other airlines, will deliberately split up people in the same booking who have not paid to sit together. If you have children under the age of 12 in your party, then they will be seated next to an adult in the party for free. However, the adult or adults must pay to reserve a seat. It's worth noting that children 12 and over are treated as adults for seat allocation purposes, and as far as we are aware, this means that they are also subject to the practice of splitting them up from other members of their group if you elect not to pay for reserved seats.
Let's talk about how all this worked for our trip now. We tested out Ryanair's baggage and seating policies, so we made separate bookings on the same flight.
I decided to splash out on a wheelie and what is considered the best seat on the aircraft.
I was keen to see just how restrictive Ryanair's small bag allowance really was, and test out their seat allocation policy. So my plan was to stick to the basic fare. I booked first and was quite pleased to see that my basic fare, at £49, booked on Tuesday the 20th of May for a flight on the 23rd of June, was about £13 cheaper than it had been the previous Friday.
As you can see, the website is very keen for you to add additional bags and seat reservations. It also is desperate to sell you other services ranging from fast-track security, insurance, onboard credit, car hire, through to airport transfers.
With final nags about buying additional carry-on baggage and insurance, you are taken to the payment screen. Believe it or not, there is one final opportunity for Ryanair to try and make money out of you here. You have been quoted your fare in the currency of your departure airport, in our case, British pounds. Ryanair offers you the option to pay in a different currency and will explain why this is not a good move in a second.
We then restarted the booking process for me and immediately was struck by the vagaries of the Ryanair's pricing. This time the basic fare for exactly the same flight and date had dropped to just £42, literally 21 minutes after John paid £49 for his. I wanted to select an exit row seat and take a larger carry-on with me. I checked the website carefully, and as we expected, it was cheaper for me to decline buying the regular fare, much to Ryanair's frustration. Remember, the regular fare bundles together an additional larger carry-on with basic seat selection. Instead, I selected the larger carry-on and seat selection later in the booking process.
If you do buy the regular fare, then the included seat is one of these in the middle of the aircraft, which in our case were priced individually at £8. Because Lou wanted the front row exit seat, her seat cost £21.50. So if she'd bought the regular fare bundle, she would have had to pay an additional £13.50 to upgrade further to the exit row.
By selecting my seat and larger carry-on separately, I paid £44, whereas the regular fare was £32.50 plus an additional £13.50 for the exit row, a total of £46. That's £2 more.
When we came to pay for Lou's ticket, we were offered the option again to pay £86.20 in local currency, British pounds, or accept Ryanair's conversion. In this case, we could have paid €109.10. If we'd have done so, then a low-fee credit card would have converted this to the equivalent of £91.99. In other words, £5.79 more than we needed to pay. This is relevant because if you do take our advice and book your return in local currency, you are likely to be better off paying in the local currency and let a low-fee credit card do the conversion rather than have Ryanair do it for you.
We tracked the basic fare pricing for our flight right up until the day of departure. Here are the results. At no point did it drop below what I paid, but as you can see, it did vary considerably, both up and down.
Okay, so it's the day before our flight and we are just working out the realities of Ryanair's baggage policy. So I am going to try and fit everything that I need into the small personal bag, which maximum dimensions can be 40 by 25 by 20. And the challenge that that presents is that most rucksacks are at least 30 centimetres wide. So what I'm intending to do is I'm intending to try and fit everything into a rucksack which is 30 centimetres wide. I'm going to have a laptop at the back which I know is 23 centimetres wide, and I'm going to constrain it to that width so that when I put it in the sizer, in theory it should fit. The other rule is it must fit underneath the seat in front of you, so that is why it cannot be more than 20 centimetres deep, and I'm pretty confident I can achieve that. This is everything that I am planning to take with me, so it's enough for supposedly 6 days, and it's literally a couple of shirts, a couple of pairs of shorts, a couple of pairs of pants, a pair of socks and some flip-flops, and my laptop and a few toiletries. So let's try and get all that in and I'll show you what it looks like. So the acid test, of course, will be at the airport tomorrow when I put it into the sizer and see if it actually fits within those dimensions.
Okay, so I have paid to take a cabin bag on board Ryanair tomorrow. Now, the dimensions for this are 55, and it must include the wheels, which, if you can see by mine, it clearly is less than 55. And then it's allowed to be 40 centimetres width, which mine definitely is. And then it has to be 20, which again, it definitely is. So I should have no problem taking this on. It's only allowed to be a maximum of 10 kilos, and it's to go in the locker overhead. So that should fit. I just want to show you the difference between this is what you can take on Ryanair, and this is what you can take on a British Airways plane, a lot roomier. So that is the difference. So 55, 40, 20, including the wheels.
Because Lou had paid for a seat, she was able to check in for her flight 60 days prior to departure. I, on the other hand, had not paid for seat selection, so my online check-in window was between 24 hours and 2 hours prior to departure. If we missed the 2-hour window or elected to check in at the airport, we would have to pay an additional €65 per person.
The temptation is to check in as soon as the window opens, but we had read reports that passengers who had not paid for a seat reservation might be allocated a more favourable seat by leaving it until closer to departure. So John checked in at around 6 a.m. for our 1 p.m. flight that day. Ryanair, of course, tried to get him to pay to select his seat, and when he didn't, it gave him a told you so message telling him he'd been allocated the dreaded middle seat.
However, I felt a small victory because it had ironically allocated seat 1B, which was a front row seat next to Lou. Now, whilst this method is a gamble, it does have some logic because the system will need to adjust the weight and balance of the aircraft, so it is probably more likely that you will be allocated a seat at the front or back of the aircraft close to departure. Let us know in the comments if you have experienced this.
At the gate, the staff were quite smiley and friendly. Boarding did not appear to follow the strict protocol of priority first, despite there being clear lanes for each. Ryanair is notorious for not using jet bridges due to the additional cost, and also because it allows them to use the aircraft's own steps front and back to board and deplane passengers. This was fine on a nice sunny day in June, but will undoubtedly be less enjoyable on a rainy day in November because you are exposed to the elements.
The aircraft which we flew on was a Boeing 737-800 and was about 17 years old. Because we had an exit row, we had to put all of our baggage in the overhead lockers. Even though we boarded roughly halfway through, there was still plenty of space in the lockers near us. Now, we didn't receive a safety briefing by the cabin crew for the very front emergency exit row.
We pushed back on time, but took off about 10 minutes late due to an air traffic control restriction. On paper, our seats are the best on the aircraft. You have unlimited legroom and are first to exit on arrival at destination. In hindsight, we think that these seats here are possibly a better choice because this galley area has quite a lot of traffic and noise from the crew and passengers queuing to use the toilet at the front.
Row 1 does come into its own though on arrival. You are literally first off the aircraft. Ryanair is a budget airline and so onboard services follow that model. Even so, the lack of smiles and friendliness was in stark contrast to our experience with Wizz Air 5 days later. Why not subscribe so that you can be notified when we release our Wizz Air review shortly?
Let's go through an example now of how much you can save by being creative with how you book your Ryanair flights. We're going to model a return flight from Bournemouth to Girona at the start of the school holidays, going out on the 23rd of July and returning a week later for 2 adults. Booking both adults on one booking and adding the regular fare to each gave us a total return fare of £278.95. £2.96.
If we'd opted for separate bookings, but each adult booking the return leg in the same booking, with no pre-reserved seats but one large cabin bag between the two adults, then the total comes down to £173.46. Booking the flights as 4 separate bookings, with the return priced in euros, reduces this further to £167.72.
One thing we did notice is that booking for a family is potentially even more complex because the system tries to draw you into buying something it calls the family package. Be sure you need all it has to offer and that you would not be better splitting your party into 2 bookings. We also noted that on flights we looked at, it was impossible to find seats together in the cheaper section included in the bundle fares.
We walked away from our Ryanair flight with mixed, if broadly positive, emotions. On one hand, we arrived safely and on time, having had a comfortable flight. Ryanair is very upfront about its baggage policy.
However, the whole approach and reputation which the airline has for constantly upselling add-ons but fiercely enforcing its policies makes the overall experience from booking to landing feel like a bit of a lottery. Ryanair's attitude to those who supply critical support services, many safety-related, such as air traffic control, airports and handling, is not something which any of us should condone.
However, we will fly Ryanair again simply because it offers good value if you're willing to navigate carefully to the constant marketing flack which is thrown at you.
Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on future videos, including a review of Ryanair's competitor, Wizz Air.